Okay, good afternoon. This is Ian Christopher Alfonso of the National Historical Commission of the Philippines and a member of the National Quincentennial Committee Secretariat. Welcome to the fifth and I think this is the last of the series of our program called Araw ng Maynila Lecture Series. It is a program in solidarity with the 450th anniversary of the founding of the city of Manila, which is today, June 24, and it is being spearheaded by the Department of Tourism, Culture, and Arts of Manila, of the City Government of Manila, together with the National Quincentennial Committee, National Historical Commission of the Philippines, and the Intramuros Administration. This program is also supported by the Department of Foreign Affairs, Department of Education, and the National Commission for Culture and the Arts. We are actually live now on the said Facebook pages of those agencies I mentioned. And in addition, we are also live on the official Facebook page of Mayor Isko Moreno and also the official Facebook page of Dr. Ambeth Ocampo. So in the past, the past weeks, we had these 4 lectures prior to this lecture of Dr. Ambeth. So the first lecture was on June 3, which yours truly delivered in commemoration of the 450th anniversary of the first native resistance against the Spaniards in Luzon in the Battle of Bangkusay. And it was followed by the lecture of Professor Xiao Chua days later. It was about the rise of the city after the death of this unnamed hero of the Battle of Bangkusay. And then my fellow in the National Historical Commission of the Philippines, Jerwil Cruz, had a lecture about the survey files of the Historical Commission on various historic sites and structures in the country, particularly in Manila. And then just earlier this morning, Dr. Jose Victor Torres, one of the foremost historians of Manila, delivered a lecture about the transformation of the Lumang Maynila, the old Manila, into the city we now know today, the city of Manila. And for this lecture, for this fifth and last lecture, we have Dr. Ambeth Ocampo, who will deliver to us a lecture about the founding of Manila, no? How we contemplate, how we internalize about Manila as a old city and then as a colonial city. And our lecturer wants only to be introduced in just two credentials. Our lecturer is a history professor of the Ateneo de Manila University and a columnist of the Philippine Daily Inquirer. Ladies and gentlemen, Professor Ambeth R. Ocampo.
Good afternoon. Before I begin my talk today, I just wish to um, make a few advertisements. For those who haven't liked it, I hope you can follow the Ambeth Ocampo page. No, it's the Ambeth Ocampo. So I keep telling people there are 5 fake Ambeth Ocampo pages, so you have to look for the one that looks like this. I'm also on Instagram, so if you want to see what I've been posting, you can also follow me on Instagram. And then also, if you're interested, most of my books are available from National Bookstore, but of course, because of the pandemic, if you don't want to go to the bookstore, you can order online from Anvil or buy the books from Shopee. My talk today is basically a reflection on Manila in the past tense. This isn't like the previous lecturers who will give you some new information. Mine is rather a way, it's like a Kwentong Maynila thing. I want to give you a sense of how I do my work, how a historian does his work, and throw out some things which I think will be interesting or relevant for you. And we see how we remember Manila in a particular way. Okay. The title basically stems from the fact that when we talk about Manila today, or when Filipinos talk about Manila, they always do so in the past tense. We don't talk about Manila in the present tense. And I think one of the reasons why we cannot speak of Manila in the present tense is because we all know that Manila, as of today, is at least 450 years old. But we must remember that Manila is not just 450, it is older than 450 years old. Um, the late Carmen Guerrero Nakpil, who was I co-chaired with her the Manila Historical Commission, and she was the founding chair of the National Historical Commission, which I later chaired. When we were both in the Manila Historical Commission, Mrs. Nakpil used to tell me that Araw ng Maynila, which is celebrated every year on June 24, should rightfully be called Araw ng Castilla. And she said that, we should not forget that the foundation that we celebrate is the foundation of Spanish Manila, and that there is a longer history before the Spanish arrived. This makes you realize that history is never innocent. History always has a point of view. History is always biased. And so, aside from making people remember that Manila was older than its Spanish foundation date, Mrs. Nakpil also fought a battle to change what our history books call, during the Second World War, the liberation of Manila, which she called the Battle for Manila. And we're quite happy that this has actually taken on. Mrs. Nakpil's first husband, relative of Jose Rizal, was killed by Japanese soldiers during the so-called liberation of Manila. So she says it's not liberation, it was actually a massacre of many people. So we should rightfully call it the Battle for Manila. So the point here is that we must remember that June 24 is the foundation of Spanish Manila, and that the city, or what we know as the city, has a long history before the Spanish period. Carlos Botong Francisco did a mural, which is used to be in Manila City Hall, but is now in the National Museum. It is usually called Philippine Struggles Through History, but this is actually a history of the city of Manila. And it starts with Raha Sulaiman or Soliman, who is also known in the sources as Raha Mura, meaning young Raha, to contrast him from his uncle Raha Matanda. So there's an old Raha and there's a young Raha. Now, if you look at it, look closely, you will see that Botong Francisco did a great deal of visual research. So in this depiction of Soliman, you will see between his feet what he Botong Francisco drew a green plant. This green plant is what we now know as Nila. It is the plant that was abundant at the time that the Spanish came, and it is the plant on which the city got its name. So the name, as you can see, even from this book called The Flora de Filipinas, it's Maynila. It does not have a D. It is not Nilad. Francisco shows very clearly in this mural, in the beginning of the mural, how the Spanish intervention in 16th century Philippine society was through the cross and the sword. And because of this, we must state this over again, even if some people don't agree with me, that the Spanish colonization of the Philippines did not begin with Magellan's exploration in 1521. It began with Legazpi in 1565. Now, whether Magellan wanted to colonize or not, he could not colonize because he did not have the troops to actually occupy. That is what the big difference between Legazpi and Magellan. Now, this mural is the subject of one of my future lectures. I already have the title. It will be Carlos V. Francisco, the Painter as Historian. And now that the National Museum has opened, its director has actually said, why don't you give a lecture in front of the actual mural so that people can see all the details that show us what Francisco depicted as the history of Manila. Now, this is also important because, as a historian, we usually think that what passes for Philippine history is actually the local history of Manila. It is not called Imperial Manila for nothing. But everything that happens in Manila gets into history, and that's why the city is important, not just as the capital, but also as a bit of history. Now, to begin, I've always been interested in maps of the Philippines, particularly maps of Manila, not because it's the capital, but because I was born in Manila and I came of age in what we now know as Metro Manila. This is one of the early depictions of Intramuros, 1671. It's in the Archivo General de Indias. And if you will look on the left, you will see that Botong Francisco actually drew this silhouette. The late historian Horacio de la Costa used to say that the shape of the city of Manila is like a turtle. And the grid forms its shell, and you can see Fort Santiago is its tail. But again, it's a Rorschach test. You see what you want to see. So de la Costa sees a turtle, but I actually see a leg of ham. So it depends what some people will see an elephant. So it depends. Now, the point here is that we have to remember that in the Spanish period, Manila was enclosed within the walls of Intramuros. That's why it's Intramuros, inside the walls. Everything outside the walls or extramuros were arrabales or suburbs. So when the Americans came in 1901, they remapped Manila and moved some of its old districts into what is now known as Rizal Province. So Manila used to be, Binondo, Ermita, etc. But parts of what used to be part of Manila, they put into what is now the Rizal Province. So you can see here in 1903, this is a map from Blair and Robertson. It shows you the city of Manila, but if you will look closely, you will see here that Manila is just Intramuros on the lower left. The others are parts or districts of what became a larger city. Now, shortly before the Japanese occupation, um, Manuel Quezon decided to create Greater Manila for better coordination. So they merged Manila and Quezon City. No? As you know, Quezon City was a new city to replace Manila, and it was the capital of the Philippines from 1948 to 1976 when Ferdinand Marcos returned it to Manila. So this Greater Manila um, was not just Manila and Quezon City, it also um, took over parts of what is Rizal, no? Caloocan, Las Piñas, the Taguig, Pateros area. It was only in 1975 that Ferdinand Marcos created Metropolitan Manila, which we now know as Metro Manila. So that was primarily Manila, Caloocan, Pasay, and Quezon City, and they added all these other municipalities, Las Piñas, Makati, etc. And in 1978, when Marcos declared regions of the Philippines, they created the National Capital Region. You will be surprised to learn that although we are the National Capital Region, it was not number one. Ferdinand Marcos made Ilocos, his home province, Region 1. Okay, just to show you how things went during martial law, Marcos not only created Metropolitan Manila, he actually appointed his wife, Imelda, as its first governor. So she became the governor of Metro Manila and the Minister of Human Settlements, which meant that unlike other first ladies before her, Imelda Marcos was the first lady to actually wield actual political power. Now, here you see a photograph of Mrs. Marcos being presented with old maps of Manila. You see the one on the left, which is an 1872 map of Manila, which was shown to her because when you look at an old map of Manila, you should not just look at the streets. In old maps of Manila, not just Intramuros, you will see that Manila was a little Venice. It had many, many waterways, esteros and alleys with water, which they claim was what kept Manila from flooding. But in the urban development of Manila, people started to build on these esteros, so trapping all the natural waterways that would lead flood water into the Pasig and to Manila Bay. Because we had covered up many of the esteros, we had so much flooding. Now, um, when you actually think about it, old maps trace the growth and development of the city. This is very important. You must not look at only one map, you should look at many maps. And in order to do this, during the pandemic, I have spent a lot of time online because many of the rare maps of the Philippines and Manila you can find online from libraries abroad. For example, the George III Topographical Collection in the British Library, they have uploaded 18,000 images for free. So now you can study it. No? And I was there in 2019 and looked at two important maps of the Philippines. Another source is the Archivo General de Indias in Sevilla, where you can download old Spanish colonial maps of Manila and the Philippines. Tell you the truth, if you go to Sevilla today, they will not even allow you to bring your cell phone inside. You need to order the images from them and they'll send it to you so many weeks later. But now, even from Manila or wherever you are in the world with a stable internet connection, you can download important maps for your enjoyment and for your research. Finally, you have the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C. that also has Philippine maps available for downloading. Now, this is not a talk on maps, but I will show you what I think is the most wonderful map of Manila that we have. This is the Rojas map of 1739, which is now in the British Library, and this depicts Manila in 1717. And as you will see, it is drawn from bird's eye view. So long before we had Google satellites or airplanes, one person actually drew the map of Manila from the air. And I don't know how how they did this, because if you will look at it in 2020, we have a drone image of Manila, and this is what it looks like in 2020. But we have a different map that was made 400 years earlier. Now, let me show you. This is, I enlarged a detail of it. This is Fort Santiago, and you will see on the upper part is the Pasig River, and then you will see the lower part, Manila Bay. So that little point, which is the tail of the turtle, is Fort Santiago, which we know was built from the wooden palisades or the fort of Soliman. So when Legazpi took over the city, the Filipinos crossed the river into Tondo and the other side of the Pasig. But if you will look at the map, you can see that in Fort Santiago, there are many, many little people. The map is not just about a city and its physical characteristics. It's not just the plan and architecture, but it actually shows you people. And if you will look, it shows you little settlements. No, outside the wall, you will see all these little houses by the side. Then we move further. No, this is further where San Agustin Church is, and you'll see that outside the walls of Intramuros, there were many settlements, and you can see Nipa houses here. You can see there's on the left, there's a horse-drawn carriage. There are people working. No, there are bancas with katig. So when you look at it, this is really one of the most amazing maps, because if you get a high-resolution copy, you can. It's like looking at it from the air. Very, very wonderful. Now, this is the right side of the map. And I like this part because you see here, it looks like a shell. That's Bastion de San Diego, which you can visit today. Here, where the arrow is pointing, it shows you the village of Bagong Bayan, which, when you think about it, Bagong Bayan means a new town, which is contrasted with the old town, which is Intramuros. And you will see how heavily populated it was. This was 1717, and when the British attacked and took over Manila in 1762, they used these settlements to bombard Manila. So after the British left, these places were cleared for the security of the city. Now, if you will look on the lower middle part, there is a word in English. It says breach. This is where the British came in during the British occupation. And when I was shown this map in the British Library, the keeper of maps told me that this breach is probably written by King George III. No, so it's actually a very, very interesting map that is worth a future lecture. Now, aside from maps, you will learn about Manila by symbol and heraldry. We all know what the Great Seal of the Philippines looks like. It looks like our flag, no? The 8-rayed sun with 3 stars. It's red, white, and blue. On the left, you have the American eagle. And then on the right, you have a gold lion, a lion rampart, which shows you the Spanish colonial period. Now, if you look at the flag of Spain, you will see that it carries the coat of arms of Spain. It has a crown. It has a triple-towered castle and a crowned lion. You know, together with other symbols about Aragon, Navarra, Granada, etc. I want you to focus on the lion and the castle, because these are the coats of arms of Leon, which is lion, and Castilla, which is castle. That's why we call Spaniards Castilla, because they came from Castilla. So these two elements are in the present coat of arms and flag of Spain. Now, I want you to show you what fake news is like. During the last presidential election, I downloaded this from a Facebook page. Some funny person decided that if you look at the logos of the Bank of the Philippine Islands and San Miguel Corporation, you will find a crown and a castle. So they claim that this was the alliance of the Ayala and Coancos, no, and they were pushing for Mar Rojas as president. And so they said, I don't know how true this is, that Erwin Tulfo looked at Wikipedia, which is a great place to research, and says that BPI is owned by Ayala, and Ayala was founded by Domingo Rojas, who is supposedly the great-grandfather of Mar Rojas. That's not true. Domingo Rojas was Spanish. No, Mar Rojas is not. And then if you go to Manila, there is in Santa Ana M. Rojas Street. That's not Mar Rojas. That's Margarita Rojas. Okay. Anyway, if you look at San Miguel Beer, you will see on the left, there's a crown, there's a castle, and it's not really a lion. It's actually a sea lion. It's a lion, a creature with a lion's head and a dolphin's tail. That symbol you also see in the coat of arms of the city of Manila, and also the seal of the President of the Philippines. Now, today, the 450th anniversary of the founding of Spanish Manila, we welcome in Manila Jose F. Cardinal Advincula, who takes possession of the Manila Cathedral and occupies this beautiful marble and onyx seat. This is what is called the cathedra. It is a seat, a throne, which is a symbol of his authority. Now, a few months ago, the top of this seat was empty. But when I visited last Saturday, they already put in the coat of arms of Cardinal Advincula. So you see it on the right. Just so that we do some fact-checking. When I went to the cathedral last Saturday, I saw that they had a bronze plaque that lists the 32 archbishops of Manila. And because it was full, they had to put in a second one. So you see here, Jose F. Cardinal Advincula 2021. It looks like a TV, a TV monitor. But when I did some fact-checking, I realized that maybe Advincula is not the 33rd Archbishop of Manila. He's the 33rd Bishop of Manila, but the 32nd Archbishop, because the first one, Domingo de Salazar, was a bishop, not an archbishop. Now, anyway, the cathedral has replied in their Facebook page, and they said that they maintain that Cardinal Advincula is the 33rd Bishop of Manila based on a book called the Annales Ecclesiasticos de Filipinas. It's a crudely illustrated manuscripts that shows the history of the church from 1574 to 1682. But this was not made in the 16th century. This was made in the 18th century. And it states erroneously that Domingo de Salazar is the first bishop and archbishop of Manila, but he died in Madrid in 1594 before he received his appointment as archbishop. So which part of the manuscript do we believe? So I wish I didn't open a hornet's nest, but this is something that we have to settle later. Also, in last Saturday, when you look up the nave of the Manila Cathedral, you will see two red hats. These are the cardinals' hats of dead archbishops of Manila. So you have the hat of Cardinal Rufino, Cardinal Santos, and the hat of Cardinal Sin. So now we have three more archbishops of Manila who are cardinals, Rosales, Tagle, and Advincula, who are still alive, but when they die, their hats will hang in this nave. Now, you look on the left, this was Advincula's coat of arms when he was the Archbishop of Capiz. You will see the hat is green, and it only has a number of tassels. On the right, because he's now cardinal, the hat is now red, and it has more tassels than the old one. The left side of the shield shows you, on the left, symbols of Capiz. The one on the right shows you the symbols of Manila. Again, the castle and the sea lion or the merlion. The symbols on the right side of the shield are, you have a lily and a carpenter's tool because the cardinal is named Jose. So that's Saint Joseph or San Jose. In the middle, forming an X, is actually chains from which Saint Peter was miraculously freed by an angel, that refers to his Latin name ad vincula, meaning in chains. And then the lower portion shows you a mountain in Capiz, which is where the birth town or the hometown of the cardinal. The horse um, is the symbol of Saint Martin of Tours, the patron saint of his hometown. And then on the left, you have a five-pointed star, which will make De La Salle University very happy because this symbolizes that he studied in De La Salle University in Manila. Anyway, it is Philip II for whom our country is named that approved the title of the city as Insignia Siempre Leal Ciudad de Manila, the distinguished and ever loyal city of Manila in 1574. In 1595, he ordered that Manila be called the head and the most important island of the Philippines. And in 1596, he conferred the coat of arms on the city, which has again a castle. And instead of putting a lion, because we are an archipelagic country, they created a creature that is half lion, that has a lion's head, and has a dolphin's body. It's in black and white, but the colors are given as follows. The castle is gold with blue windows, and this is all on a red field. And below it is a silver creature with a lion's head and a dolphin's body, and carrying in its hand, on its paw rather, an unsheathed sword. I'm a bit upset because while we have had this symbol from 1596, when you mention a merlion today, because of effective nation branding, Singapore has created the merlion. And so when you mention Singapore, this is what we remember. According to the Singapore Tourist Bureau, mer means Temasek, the sea, and lion is a reference to Singapura, or the Lion City. Therefore, many years ago, when I gave a tour to the president of Singapore, when we had become friendly to each other, I breached protocol and said, "Excellency, your country stole our merlion." And he says, "No, no, that was created." I said, "Yes, it was created by your tourist bureau, but we owned that symbol since 1596. It is a castle and a lion's head with a dolphin's body." So, what I'm showing you here is that we have lost our appreciation for useless information. All of these things, I mean, that's Ambeth Ocampo talking trivialities, but it is these little things that make up our history and make our history very interesting or engaging. The magic of history does not lie in dates, names, places. It lies in connections. The power of history lies in its relevance. So all these things contribute to our understanding and our appreciation of our history and our past. Now, I will show you here also Rizal's Manila. For this, I was very fortunate to have had Pedro Ortiz Armengol, the former Spanish ambassador to the Philippines, who around 1986 or 87 told me one Saturday, he says, "Fetch me in my residence and I will show you Rizal's Manila." So Ortiz Armengol published as early as 1958, that's older than me, a book called Intramuros de Manila. So he has always been interested in the city of Manila. So on that Saturday, he took with him a copy of the 1887 Noli Me Tangere in the original Spanish, and we brought along a map of Manila that showed not only Intramuros, but its arrabales, or its suburbs. Now, the funny thing here is when you looked at the map, most of Rizal's Manila does not occur inside Intramuros, which is Spanish Manila. It actually occurs in a few streets in Binondo. So this was our first stop. I parked the car and we started walking along Juan Luna Street, which was formerly Calle Anluague. And it was while we were walking that Ortiz Armengol told me that the surface of a city may change, but its layout remains the same. So buildings will be renovated or changed, torn down, and a new building built. Architecture changes, but the layout, the cities, the rivers, the walkways, these always remain the same, no matter how things change. Now, he opened the book and it says, Capitan Tiago's house is situated towards a bend of the Pasig River called by many the Estero de Binondo. And according to Ortiz Armengol, he thinks the present building, which is now the state center, is where Capitan Tiago's house used to be. So, I mean, it's not an invention of Rizal. There was an actual house. So, as added documentation, Rizal stayed, not Rizal, Ibarra stayed in what was called the Fonda de Lala. And from his hotel room, he could see across the Estero de Binondo into Capitan Tiago's house. So we sort of know if the state investment house is where Tiago's house is, the Fonda de Lala was directly across the Estero. Why is it called the Fonda de Lala? Because the owner of the hotel was Ramon Reyes Lala, who wrote this book on the Philippines. So if you trace it, we actually have a picture of the French hotel, the Fonda de Lala, no? And I looked up the old, business directory, and you will see La Francesca is Calle Baraka 37, owned by Lala Ari. Okay. Now, the thing here is you open your Noli Me Tangere from chapter 4, and you will see that Ibarra starts from Calle Anluague, which is now here, no, which is now Juan Luna Street. From this place, Ibarra walks towards the Church of Binondo. So you see he walks that way. And then when he looks at the church tower, he looks at the church tower, the clock is not working, and then he saw an iron grill that he had vandalized as a boy. No, so he goes to the church, here it is again, and then from here, he turned on Sacristia Street, which is where the sacristy of the church was, which is now Calle Ongpin. And while he walked on Sacristia Street, Ibarra even says there's a loose stone on the pavement that was there when he was a boy, and it was still there when he walked there. So he stopped at the corner of Sacristia, which is Ongpin, and San Jacinto, which is now Tepinpin. And here he was updated by the teniente, who tells him that his father died in jail. And then from this spot, Ibarra calls a taxi and asks to be brought to the Fonda de Lala. So he goes all the way to Calle de la Barraca, and that is where the Fonda de Lala is. So you can see now how you can actually trace the root of Rizal. And if you read the novel, what Rizal describes in the smell of the city, you can still smell today, over 100 years since it was written. Now, Jose Alejandrino, Rizal's friend, says that Capitan Tiago's house was on Anluague and that it belonged to Balbino Mauricio. This is what Rizal told him. It is now 1751 Luna Street. And the Fonda de Lala is what was the El Siglo building in 1941. So when you look at it, this is what the location of those places. This is what it's like when you do a Google bird's eye view. And this again shows you the wonder of Google. No? So we can now see where these things are. Following Alejandrino, there is a painting by Jose Honorato Lozano in 1864 that spells out the name Balbino Mauricio. This is the guy who owned the Capitan Tiago house. And this painting is wonderful because it not only shows you scenes of Manila, but it shows you the interior of the house. So this painting is actually walking inside the house of Capitan Tiago. So this is the entrance. If you read the book, it talks about a wide stairway, rug-covered steps, potted green plants, baskets of flowers, etc. Then you have the hallway inside and you see the decoration. When you go up, you see a sala. or a living room. And according to Rizal, this sala is called the Caida. And he says, I don't know why. And this evening, it was used as a orchestra hall. Now, the funny part here is Rizal says they call this part of the house a Caida. And he says, I don't know why. I will let you know. In various translations, they get it wrong. No, Lacson Locsin says the Caida is a spacious living room. Augenbaum says the Caida is a broad interior patio, and he almost gets it right because Caida is the root word is the Spanish word caer, meaning to fall, a fallen place, and so he says. There is an odd meaning. And Augenbaum did not realize that the reason why it's called the Caida is when ladies went up the stairs in olden times, they lifted the front of their skirts, and when they got to the top or the landing, they let go of the hems of their skirts. So literally, the Caida is where the hems of the skirts fall, where and that's why it's called a Qaeda. And of course, Rizal knew what that was, but he's playing tricks on you. So when you read the Noli, there are many little tricks, many little questions, and Rizal tries to engage with his reader. Then there's a description of in the text of the dinner of Capitan Tiago, and here we see a picture of the dining room of Balbino Mauricio's house. So again, it's connecting a piece of literature with a visual record. Another visual record is this. This is, if you're looking towards the Church of Binondo, there's a bridge, no? And I went there a few months ago, so the bridge is still there, and you still see Binondo. But what's important is that in chapter 22 of El Filibusterismo, you will see on the left there is a pansiteria. It says Pansiteria de Macanista de Buen Gusto. This is mentioned in chapter 22 of the Fili. It's a Macau restaurant. And I used to think it was fictional, but this shows you, this was taken in the American period, that there was an actual pansiteria Macanista that used to be there. So as you can see, getting to know Manila is not done with just books, documents, and artifacts. And I'd like to recommend, if you are interested in Manila, the best books on Manila are one by Carlos Quirino, two by Nick Joaquin. These are the books that changed my life, especially Almanac for Manileños. Jose Victor Torres's Ciudad Murada, which is very small but very handy and historically accurate because he once worked for the Intramuros Administration. If you want pictures, there's a book called Intramuros of Memory. Based on these books, I have walked many times through Intramuros, and you have to open your eyes. Like, this is Calle Real. This is near San Agustin. If you will look, the upper portion shows you the old Spanish period tiles that form the street name. And then below, instead of having new ones made, we have this cheap Mariwasa tile spelling the same thing. But you can see the old tiles and the new are there together. And if you touch the walls and look closely at the walls, you will see that they are pockmarked and scarred by the fighting during the Battle for Manila in 1945. You have shrapnel, you have bullet holes, you have all sorts. So the city of Intramuros actually shows you, like a physical body, what it went through during the war. This used to be covered with moss. The Agustinians built a gate to enter into San Agustin. Fortunately, when they made the gate, they didn't destroy it. There is a small street sign here that says Calle de San Lorenzo. And this isn't the name of the street in the maps, but this is there, which shows you that it was named differently at that time. 19th century, the Caruth album, you have the Manila Cathedral, no? And we talk about the arrival of the religious orders, no? The first who to arrive were Augustinians on the right and Franciscans on the left, 1578. The Jesuits arrived in 1581 and the Dominicans arrived later. This one shows a native Spanish or native secular priest, no, being kissed by a lady. This one from the Caruth album, it says the Dominican Church. This isn't the Dominican Church. This is actually San Agustin, which still exists except for the tower on the left has fallen off during one of the many earthquakes. But everything, including the old doors, are still there. So when for the 20, 30 years that I have been teaching, I would bring my students to Intramuros because this is a place where the teaching aids are bigger than life. You can walk in there and you have a sense of what Spanish Manila was like. But if you walk around the Intramuros, you will see many little Chinese things like this. No, they're either from grave markers or they're called piedra china. They're granite, and you will see Chinese markings on them, which is also a part of history. If you go inside beyond the church, by the door, there is this 18th century grave, which is still intact. But when you walk inside, they broke up all the granite, and you will see them like a jigsaw puzzle there. So it shows you that aside from books, walking around a city gives you a different feel and a different appreciation for history and development of the city. In conclusion, Ian Alfonso wanted me to talk about, because this is still the 500th anniversary of the Spanish period, he wanted me to talk about the two oldest Catholic images in the Philippines. Now, these are replicas. No? On the right, you have the Santo Niño, and then on the left, you have the Nuestra Señora de Guia, which is venerated um, in Ermita. And I always post like this. It's not really Japanese peace sign. When you put your palm out, that means you're copying the Santo Niño. Anyway, we all know from history that in the mass baptism that was made in Cebu in 1521, the Queen of Cebu, Humabon's wife, was offered three images. She was offered an image of Christ, which she did not like. She refused. She was offered an image of the Virgin. She also refused. But she accepted the Santo Niño, probably because it was cute. No, it looked like a doll. So these are the three of the oldest images, supposedly oldest Christian images in the Philippines that we can trace to Magellan in 1521. Santo Niño on the left, upper right is the Virgin of Guadalupe, which is also the patroness of Cebu, and below it is the Ecce Homo, which is in the Basilica of the Santo Niño. Now, it's interesting because on the left, you have the Santo Niño as he looks like today. But in pre-war times, I saw this postcard. The Santo Niño is black. And then this one taken in the 1970s, he's white. I mean, they probably gave him an overdose of glutathione. Now he is brown. So they say, no, that has something to do with the flash or whatever. But it shows you over time that the texture of the complexion of the Nino was changing over time. What is now interesting is that the Louvre Museum actually has a Santo Nino image that was made in the Flanders workshop. And it is the twin or the cousin of the Santo Nino, made in the same time and place, except that our Santo Nino we've never seen him naked. It's always dressed up, but it is made by the same maker. This is the Ecce Homo. So when you go to the Basilica of the Santo Niño in Cebu, he's hardly visited. You go to the right and you will see this image of the Ecce Homo, which they claim was found when they found the grave of someone called Raha Carli, who they think was Humabon, who was named Carlos. He was holding this image and his body was supposedly incorrupt. Now, this is the image of the Virgin of Guadalupe, which is in Guadalupe. So you see her without the clothes. This is actually Philippine make, no, 18th century. So we don't know if this was really brought by Magellan or if this was brought much earlier, now much later. Now, in many pieces of art on the left, the Annales Ecclesiasticos, it shows you the finding of the Santo Niño, and this on the right, you have an image of one of the bishops who had a vision of the Santo Niño. In 1565, when Miguel Lopez de Legazpi arrived, they issued a document that talks about the finding of the Santo Niño. Now, in one version, there's somebody named Juan de Gaicoa who found the image in a hut together with some idols. And this is very interesting. It claims that the Santo Niño was considered the god of water. And then when they wanted rain, they would get the image of the Santo Niño and submerge him in water until it rained. So, I mean, this is quite interesting that they really treated him like a child. But over time, the Santo Niño was made into our image and likeness. No, if you go to Quiapo, you will see this wonderful Santo Niño with an erect penis, which shows you this is a fertility, good luck, aphrodisiac amulet. This one naman is the Iglesia Filipina. They had, or the Aglipayans, they had the Virgin of Balintawak, where the Niño is wearing Katipunero outfit. No, so you see him dressed in a different way. So we dress him in different ways. You have every year in January you have a Santo Niño festival. So you have a Santo Niño in Barong. We have Santo Niño who is a medic. I guess we'll probably have a Santo Niño with a face mask, no, for the pandemic. But we have a Santo Niño who is a policeman. We have a security guard. We even have an NBI agent. We have sailors, Santo Niño Marino. We have a Santo Niño chef. We even have a Santo Niño cigarette vendor. No, quite amusing. No, this one you have a chemist, you have a judge. So we give him all the attributes that we want. We can dress him up like a Barbie doll. We even have a Santo Niño, Santa Claus. We have a Santo Niño who's a bishop, and this is rather strange. It is a Santo Niño that's like the Virgin of Carmel. We have a Santo Niño who is a farmer, who looks like San Isidro Labrador of the Pahiyas Festival. And we have a Santo Niño Igorot, and we have a Santo Niño Ilaw San Daigdigan, which looks, God knows what that is. We have a Santo Niño Welcome Japan, and we have a Santo Niño Hiranan, whatever that is. But my all-time favorite is the Santo Niño of Jollibee, which shows you the Niño holding a Jollibee burger. Now, this is the Santo Niño when he came to Manila. He had his own seat in business class of Philippine Airlines. But it shows you that the Santo Niño has been indiogenized. It is the foreign that made local. And in the Santo Niño, we see not just conversion into Christianity, but we see accommodation and we see resistance. It is through these that we can recast our image of the colonial period to see that we have taken on the foreign and made it our own. And that is also not just accommodation, but resistance. Now to get to the Nuestra Señora de Guia that's venerated in Ermita. Now, they found the Santo Niño in Cebu in 1565. They found the Nuestra Señora de Guia in 1571. Unfortunately, no, historians are skeptical by nature, and I find it so uncanny that they find the Santo Niño in Cebu before they take over Cebu, and they take the finding of the Santo Niño as a divine sign that they were to take over Spanish Cebu. And then when they went to Manila, they found another image of the Virgin. But this one, they could not trace all the way to Magellan. So they had to explain what it's like. Now, in the Annales Ecclesiasticos, they said that they found the image of the Nuestra Señora on a pandan tree. And they put her in a church, but she kept returning to where the pandan tree was. So eventually they created a church for her in what is now called Ermita. These are old pictures of her without the clothing. So you can see that it is a Western image. It's not an anito. And she's actually a image of the Immaculate Conception. She does not carry a baby. So in an old novena of the Nuestra Señora de Guia, I saw the footnote that the history of the image is given in Juan de la Concepcion's Historia General de Filipinas, and I looked it up, and it also tells the story of how it was brought to the cathedral and how, later on they built another church and how many miracles were documented, etc. Now, the main problem here is if the Marian image predated the arrival of Legazpi, who brought it here? If this was the image that Humabon's wife refused, how did it get to Manila? This we will never know. So if you will look, there are many theories. One is that the image was brought by Fray Odoric in the 14th century. Another says it was the image refused by Humabon's wife in 1521. Another says there was a Catholic ship that was shipwrecked and it was left here. Another says that it was brought by St. Thomas when he went to India to evangelize. And finally, which is the most convincing one, the image of the Virgin was probably brought by the Portuguese. Now, our problem here is that if it was brought by the Portuguese, this would underscore the fact that if you will not remember, when Spain and Portugal were fighting over the discoveries and the exploration, ages of exploration, the Pope, to keep the peace, cut the world in half like an orange and gave one half to Spain and one half to Portugal. It is not well known that by the time that Legazpi and Magellan came to the Philippines actually falls on the Portuguese side of the world. But they just insisted, we're already here, we don't want to go. So if the Virgin was brought by the Portuguese, then the Spanish occupation of the Philippines is actually problematic. So it shows you how even something like this can be very, very important to study and to see what it actually means. So to end, you should ask yourself when we look into the history of of Manila, we ask ourselves when we look at history, what do we remember? And why do we remember? Because what we see here in my little presentation is that history isn't as clean and easy as we have it in our textbooks. History is complicated, history is contested territory, and we actually need a more nuanced view of the past. So, in this little discussion on what I think are interesting facets of the history of Manila, we have to remember a few things. Again, that the magic of history is not in data, it's not in very boring dates, names, places. The magic of history is actually in finding connections between stray bits of data. So while it is important that we have an appreciation of useless information, the magic is putting things together and finding not just a narrative but also finding relevance. No, the power of history lies in its relevance, and I hope that in this little presentation we are able to see history for what it is and hopefully make you as ordinary citizens historians in your own right. Thank you and good afternoon.
Thank you so much, Professor Ambeth Ocampo, for the lecture. So we're still collating some questions. Professor Amb, I have a question, just for the sake of the those of our viewers na baka hindi nila na gets yung pagbanggit nyo sa word na taxi. Narinig niyo po, Sir Ambeth?
Anong
Hello,
taxi?
Sir Ambeth, yes.
Yes.
Yes, kanina kasi bibinanggit kayo yung si Ibarra ay nag-taxi papuntang
Ibarra, yeah, nag-taxi.
Punta de
Actually,
Lala.
well, they call it a
Taxi na
taxi,
yun.
but it's actually parang kalesa siguro yun. No? I mean, in the translation, it's a cab, it's a taxi, but I think it's a horse-drawn carriage.
Okay, so hindi siya taxi sa tubig, ano po?
Hindi siya taxi sa tubig. And you can see the route I followed, the route by the street. No?
Yes, po.
So it's on, he went by road. We have some comments in the chat. No, somebody said that the Santo Niño policeman used to be owned by Senator Barbers. Thank you to Victores for that bit of information. And what else? So these are the ones. There are no questions in our.
Yes.
So if there are questions in the Facebook page, that would be interesting. Okay.
Okay,
Can you
we have one.
recommend Filipino language, Noli and Fili? Okay, in school I recommend for English Soledad Lacson Locsin, Leon Maria Guerrero, or the Penguin Augenbaum edition. For Filipino, the best one is that by Virgilio Almario, National Artist for Literature. All other Filipino versions are either inaccurate, or if you want a really nice one, there is a Patricio Mariano translation which is available online. It's very faithful to the Spanish, but it's written in Old Tagalog, so people find it very, very difficult to understand.
Actually, the Patricio
Okay,
Mariano
anything else?
version, the Patricio Mariano version is still being reproduced by NHCP.
Yeah, by the
Yeah,
NHCP. Yeah.
yeah,
If you want to read it, it's a beautiful translation, but a millennial will find it very
yes,
hard to
quite,
read.
yeah.
So
There's this question
okay,
from
any
the
other?
Facebook. Yes, Professor Ambeth, there's this question from the Facebook uh, from Miss Christine Santos. Can you recommend more materials that show a personal perspective of Manila? Personal perspective of Manila.
For more well, actually, personal perspectives of Manila, you will find them in the many um, travelers' accounts of the Philippines. Unfortunately, most of it in the Spanish period, they're written by foreigners, visitors, tourists, businessmen, friars. They're describing the city. We only get Filipino voices again when Rizal is writing already from the 19th century onwards. In order to read a lot of these, I can refer you to the 55-volume work, which we know as the Blair and Robertson. You just open to Manila and or Cebu or Laguna for that matter, and you will find a lot of material on that.
And also the
Okay.
World of Felix Rojas, the book, The World of
Yeah,
Felix
the
Rojas.
World
Yeah.
of Felix
Yeah.
Rojas,
Yes,
19th
yeah.
century. There's a lot. There's a lot.
Yeah.
Also, from the Filipiniana Book Guild, there is Stanley. There are two accounts of American accounts of the Philippines and basically Manila.
And
We have a
then,
question from
yes.
Luisito Olegario asking about Tondo being part of Pampanga. That's best addressed by the expert on this, who is Ian Alfonso.
No.
I know
Actually.
very little about Tondo being part of Pampanga. So can you answer that quickly for them?
Ano, yes, unfortunately, hindi ko rin, isa to sa anomaly. Because
Oh,
Miguel
yeah.
de Luarcas, report of the encomiendas, mentioned that the opposite side of Pasig River, so technically, beginning from Tondo up to Bulacan, Pampanga, it speaks different language daw from those in the southern banks. So, well, magagalit din sa Dr. Veneracion pag sinabi mong Kapampangan ng Bulacan. so, medyo
But
kailangan natin
it can
ma-corroborate
be
the account.
anything, di ba?
Yeah.
It can be Chabacano from Cavite.
Yeah.
It can be Ilocano. We don't know, di ba? So
Yeah.
they
So
didn't.
maybe,
They were not clear about the language. So again,
yes.
as I was saying, all history always has a bias and a point of view. So if you're Kapampangan or if you're Roby Tantinko from the Kapampangan Study Center, you will insist that Tondo was part of Pampanga, but it can be part of Bulacan or Manila or some other point. But this is not very, very clear. It needs further research at the moment.
And then another question from Khalil Garcia. Can you talk about the Spanish Pidgin Creole that was once prominent in Manila?
Okay, this was
Chabacano.
this was it's probably Chabacano, or it's also the way that people would copy how the Spaniards would talk and laugh at how they mispronounced, Filipino words and language. So they played around with it in the same way that we also do it. We are trilingual, no? So we play around with languages a lot. We use Tagalog, we use English in many ways, no? But it's probably Chabacano, no? And there are studies on that.
And maybe for our last question, Professor Ambeth, because I think you have an appointment after this,
Bakit inilipat ang kabisera ng Pilipinas mula sa Quezon? Okay. Nilipat kasi sa Quezon City kasi nga si Quezon wanted a new city. No? Even in the early American period, Intramuros was, when you read Nick Joaquin kasi you have this very romantic idea of how wonderful Intramuros is. But people who lived through it, like the late Teodoro Agoncillo and Emilio Aguilar Cruz, they used to tell me, we lived in Intramuros before the war. It was a mosquito-infested, filthy, ugly place. So by the early 20th century, it wasn't what it used to be. So we have romantic ideas of what Intramuros is like. So because of that, I guess Quezon decided let's open a new city. So by doing that, the plans to develop the Burnham plan to develop Manila was shelved, and they put their sights on Quezon City. There has also been some controversy because Quezon owned a lot of land in Quezon City, and when they moved the capital to Quezon City, of course, his land values went up. That's one of the things that people have been bringing out. But Quezon City was our capital until Marcos brought it back to Manila for historical reasons. Okay. We will take two more questions.
Sige, another question from Bernie Lopez. May kaugnayan po ba sa kasaysayan ang kasalukuyang lalawigan ng Cavite sa Kingdom of Tondo at Namayan?
Hindi ko rin alam yan. No? So, maraming mga ganyan. No? Or we can all go into the Taliano or owning the entire Philippines. No? Ang kasaysayan ng Maynila hindi pa naisusulat ng buo. Marami nang nagsulat ng little studies, pero itong lalo na yung the early part na hindi natin alam. No? Yung alam natin mula nung dumating na yung Kastila, but what was it before? And we know that from the archaeological record, when you look at Santa Ana, yung mga nahanap na Chinese tradeware there from the Song Dynasty, that's 11th, 12th century, which means hindi pa napapanganak si Magellan, nagtre-trade na tayo sa Inchik. So it shows you that Manila was an important trading port as early as the 11th and the 12th century. And this should also show us that although may away tayo ngayon with the West Philippine Sea, the oldest friend of the Philippines is not Spain or the US. The oldest friend of the Philippines is China, that has been trading with us since the Tang Dynasty. So we have 1,000 years of trade and cultural relations. That's why marami sa atin may Inchik, marami tayong influences na Inchik, because we have had 1,000 years of a relationship. Okay.
I think this is our last question to entertain, Professor Ambeth, from Mr. Bernard Supetran. Is there any alternative date to be called as is there any alternative date we can refer to as the foundation of the pre-colonial Manila? Okay.
I knew the late E. Arsenio Manuel, and I met him when he gave a lecture in Intramuros. Arsenio Manuel, I sat in his class on Philippine prehistory, and this was in the 1980s. And Manuel used to say that we should excavate Fort Santiago and Intramuros so that we will find the remains of Soliman's fort. And I remember telling him, Professor Manuel, pag nag-excavate tayo, dyan baka masira naman natin yung Fort Santiago at Intramuros. Tapos wala naman tayong makikita. And I remember his very nationalistic reply was, So what kung mawala yung Intramuros? That is a Spanish intrusion. We must look back into the pre-Spanish, the pure Pinoy foundations of the city of Manila. But again, that's a question of heritage. Which heritage will we protect? Sabi ko, nandiyan na nga yung Spanish, kahit galit tayo sa Kastila. But the point there is, let's be happy with what is already there for whatever it means, because we still do not know what we will find if we do excavation. So they tried excavating. They have found in the San Ignacio Church some 17th, 18th century Ming ceramics and earthenware. But what is important is that in the Santa Ana, some very, very old pottery, which shows you that the foundation date of Santa Ana, which was Namayan or Manila, probably goes back to the 10th or the 11th century. But we, again, that is not history. No, it's prehistory. That's why it is the preserve of archaeologists and anthropologists, not historians like me who deal with written record. And for written record, our earliest written record is the Laguna copper plate, which is the 9th, 10th century.
Okay, so thank you very much, Professor Ambeth, for the time and expertise. Ayan. So maraming natuwa dahil nadagdag yung Facebook page nyo as one of the pages cross-posting this activity. And I think mas marami pang tanong doon sa Facebook page po ninyo na pwede nyong sagutin.
Tingnan ko na lang doon.
So again, yes po, opo. So on behalf of the National Historical Commission of the Philippines and the team composing this Araw ng Maynila Lecture Series, thank you very much. And magkita-kita pa po tayo sa mga susunod na activities ng Quincentennial Committee sa Facebook page. Marami po yan. At abangan po natin si Sir Ambeth sa mga iba pa nating mga activities online. Thank you very much.
Salamat.